Good Thursday morning, and thank you for being with us here on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Jason Hackett. Let's get to your headlines. Just in this morning, strike averted. Hundreds of SEIU Health Partners workers have reached a tentative agreement after their most recent contract ended last week. According to the union, the agreement includes wage increases, more money for registered nurses and medical technicians, and a new labor management committee to talk about the impact of AI and healthcare work. Our top story here: in an effort to decrease tension around immigration enforcement in Minnesota, Border Czar Tom Homan says 700 federal agents are leaving the state. In a press conference we brought you live on our Sunrise stream on KARE 11 Plus yesterday, Homan said this decision is a result of cooperation between county jails and the feds. That cooperation is allowing ICE to take custody of undocumented immigrants before they're released from jail. Homan did admit that Operation Metro Surge has not been perfect. He also said there will now be one chain of command rather than two to ensure all federal agents are on the same page and, quote, follow the rules. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey says the operation is still going too far.
This is not about ICE doing normal ICE stuff. The objection is to ICE pulling people off the street indiscriminately. It's these roving bands that were walking through Minneapolis and targeting both Latino and Somali people without regard for whether any crime had been committed at all.
Homan says there are still 2,000 federal agents in Minnesota. He says a complete drawdown of federal agents will depend on continued cooperation between state and local law enforcement, as well as a decrease in the rhetoric and attacks against federal agents. As de-escalation attempts come down from DHS, some educators and Minnesota school districts are now suing the federal government. They seek to block immigration enforcement in or near public schools. Education Minnesota says it filed the suit because attendance dropped drastically last month. Some districts reported declines of nearly 1/3, with others saying attendance fell below half. The group points to reports of students being detained near schools, bus stops, and dismissal areas, and says the presence of immigration agents is creating fear and anxiety in classrooms.
Immigration enforcement activities are adversely impacting all of our students, irrespective of immigration status. It is not normal for elementary-aged kids to see a large portion of their classmates gone.
Educators are asking a judge to keep ICE and Border Patrol away from schools and transportation routes, except in extraordinary circumstances. Governor Tim Walz is also calling for an end to enforcement near schools. In an exclusive interview with NBC News, President Trump said he could maybe use a softer touch on immigration following the events in Minneapolis. That on the same day that his Border Czar announced that hundreds of federal agents will be leaving the city. Immigration, one of a range of topics the president touched on, including the future of elections. NBC's Alice Barr has details from Washington.
Hi there. President Trump not backing down on immigration, said he still wants to expand his crackdown, but wants to be invited in future operations and doesn't want his administration to force its way into a city.
Look, I want the last one.
President Trump in an exclusive sit-down with NBC's Tom Llamas, reflecting on what he's learned through weeks of uproar over his administration's immigration crackdown in Minneapolis.
Maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch. But you still have to be tough. These are criminals. We're dealing with really hard criminals.
That after the president's Border Czar announced 700 federal immigration agents are withdrawing from Minnesota, aiming to end the surge in manpower, but not the mission.
We're not backing down at all. I said today mass deportations will continue.
While Democrats are pushing to formalize major changes to immigration enforcement before Department of Homeland Security funding runs out next week.
It's got to rein in ICE in very serious ways. And if they're not serious and they don't put in real reform, they shouldn't expect our votes.
President Trump also addressing bipartisan pushback over his recent comments about nationalizing elections in some places, despite the Constitution dictating that states run elections.
We can't allow cheating in elections. Now, if we need to put in federal controls as opposed to state controls, remember this. They're really an agent.
The president repeating his debunked claims of widespread fraud in the 2020 election amid the FBI's controversial seizure of 2020 ballots in Fulton County, Georgia.
They're going to look at it, and now they're going to find out the true winner of that state.
There is no evidence Georgia's results were marred by fraud, and a hand count of ballots confirmed the results shortly after the election. On the economy, President Trump said he expects interest rates to come down and that his pick to lead the Federal Reserve wouldn't have gotten the offer had he said he wanted to raise rates. And while noting that he believes the central bank is, quote, in theory, an independent body, the president suggested he knows the economy better than almost anybody and the Fed should follow his lead. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Other headlines this morning, a DHS lawyer is out of her post at the U.S. Attorney's Office after saying on the record to a judge, quote, "The system sucks, this job sucks." Records show ICE attorney Julie Lee volunteered to help the overwhelmed U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota last month as a wave of federal lawyers resigned from their positions. Lee told the judge she didn't get training from her current assignment, and court records show she inherited nearly 100 habeas corpus cases in less than a month. Right now, we don't know if she still holds a job as an attorney for ICE. We're learning this morning St. Paul City Council is introducing an ordinance requiring law enforcement to be unmasked in the city. City Council members say it's to help with public trust. The exceptions, undercover operations and protective gear. The council is expected to vote on it later this month. A similar law in California faces a legal challenge from the federal government. Right now, fears of a modern nuclear arms race are rising. The last nuclear treaty between the U.S. and Russia expires today. So that means the countries no longer have limits on their arsenals. China is rapidly building its own nuclear weapons supply. Critics say the U.S. needs fewer constraints as a result. President Donald Trump is calling for a treaty that includes the U.S., Russia, and China. Results are in from Tuesday's Minnesota precinct caucuses. The kickoff to election season gives voters a chance to talk about issues and show their support for candidates. But this year, the turnout is telling its own story. The Minnesota DFL says a historic number of people, at least 30,000, showed up to voice their concerns, especially about ICE. The party's former chair, Mike Erlandson, says Senator Amy Klobuchar, who has little opposition from other Democrats in the race for governor, was a popular name at caucuses.
If that extra turnout that we saw this week translates into extra turnout come November elections, I think you're going to see a very, very good year for Democrats.
Meanwhile, former Republican State Senate Majority Leader Amy Frederickson says although the issue of fraud hasn't made as many headlines recently, it was evident on Tuesday that it's still the dominant concern for Republican voters. Tuesday's straw poll shows House Speaker Lisa Demuth is the GOP's preferred candidate for governor, but Frederickson says party leaders will have to work on their messaging when it comes to how the federal administration handled the crackdown on immigrants in Minnesota.
I do think that it's something that all of Minnesota is bothered by. And I think that anyone who wants to run for office or lead the state is going to have to get a strong message about what happened was wrong.
Now, we still have a long way to go before the midterms in November. There are multiple events between now and then, including a big state convention for both parties over the summer. Right now, more federal resources could be heading to Arizona to help in the search for Today Show host Savannah Guthrie's mom. President Trump posting on Truth Social hours ago saying he spoke with Savannah, telling her he is, quote, directing all federal law enforcement to be at the family's and local law enforcement's complete disposal immediately. We're also hearing from Savannah and her siblings for the first time in a pretty emotional video. Take a listen.
We live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you, and we are ready to listen.
Nancy Guthrie was reported missing Sunday by her family. Police say they believe she was taken from her Tucson, Arizona home against her will, leaving her phone, car, and daily medication behind. Officials still have no suspect or person of interest as of right now. A big day in Anoka with just hours to go until the state's first city-owned cannabis dispensary opens its doors. Audrey Russo is there right now with a preview.
Yeah, it took less than a year for the city to build the Anoka Cannabis Company behind me. And just to give you your bearings, it's actually right next to the municipally owned liquor store here in the city. And officials tell me that building this was just their next logical step.
Using recreation to pay for more recreation just makes sense.
Yep.
To Anoka's Enterprise Operations Director, Kevin Morelli.
We're making history.
The first city-owned dispensary in the state of Minnesota opens this weekend. Its earnings will generate a fund that the city council still has to figure out how to spend.
Going to parks, maybe river projects, possibly even reducing the levy.
Future decisions in a fast-track space.
Started going about 150 miles an hour.
As the Anoka Cannabis Company just got its cannabis license last month.
So these are dime bags, and then these will house edibles. You might see some pre-roll. We really want to set the standard of how government and community can really collide to help not only the city, but the community in that city as well.
So the ribbon cutting is this afternoon. Then tomorrow at 10 o'clock, retail sales begin by appointment only. And they're going to do that kind of as a soft launch until Monday. And that is when their walk-in model will begin. Back to you.
Audrey, thank you. Stick with us. More news and weather coming up right after the break.